The subway encounter. The subway was running late again, screeching through the underbelly of Megasite 9 with its usual stench of oil, recycled breath, and hollow routines. Lena Mallerie boarded it like she did every day, 32 years old, wearing her faded green hospital uniform with the company crest peeling at the edges. She was the kind of woman no one ever truly saw. Her hair was tied back loosely, shoes soaked from the morning rain, arms aching from hours of scrubbing corridors in the Galactic Medical Center. Every hallway there was bigger than the cramped apartment she called home. As she squeezed into the crowded car, no one moved. Heads buried in comm devices, headphones buried in ears, minds buried in their own small orbits. She stood gripping the overhead rail like always, silently trying to keep her feet from sliding on the slick metal floor. The subway hissed and stuttered as it pulled into the next station, Karakon Cross Link, a high-tier zone where only diplomats and off-world merchants usually disembarked. Then the car changed. It began with a shift in pressure, a low rumbling tension that made the lights flicker and sent small vibrations crawling down the spine of every soul aboard. The air tasted like burnt copper, and in the silence, something primal stirred in everyone's bones. The doors opened, and he stepped in. He was ancient, not just in age, but in presence. Scaled wings folded tightly against a body that barely fit through the entrance. He hunched forward, clutching a metallic cane in one taloned hand. His eyes were half-clouded, and soft wheezes from his cracked nostrils sounded like the whisper of a dying storm. An alien dragon. One of the Aladdin, the last surviving species from before the first Terran calendar. Nobody had seen one in decades, let alone this close. They were legends, dangerous, revered, feared. Yet he looked tired. He stood there, swaying slightly with the train's motion, searching for something, anything, to lower his brittle frame onto. But no one moved. Not the corporate brokers, not the defense officers, not the polished androids with gold-plated shells. Every eye dropped, every breath held, as if fear alone might make them invisible to him. A myth stood before them, and they did nothing. Lena watched. Her heartbeat quickened, not with fear, but with something else. Something older than protocol or class or rank. She let go of the rail. "Sir," she said gently, stepping past a frozen executive. "You can take my seat." There was a pause in the universe. The dragon turned his head slowly, cautiously, as if unsure whether the voice belonged to the realm of dreams or reality. He blinked his cloudy eyes, and something shimmered behind the fog of age, something fragile and fierce. "No one offers a seat to a dragon," he rasped, his voice like distant thunder. "I'm not no one," Lena replied simply. A few passengers gasped under their breath, as though she had just touched the sun with bare hands. The old dragon's gaze rested on her for a full breath, then another. Then he moved. It took him a while. His claws scraped against the floor, wings brushing against the ceiling as he settled into the spot she had vacated. The seat creaked beneath his ancient weight. He exhaled, deep, long, and slow, and closed his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered, almost inaudibly. She just smiled and gripped the rail once more. The train kept moving, but something fundamental had shifted in the cosmos. Neither of them knew it yet, but that simple act of kindness had just changed the fate of two worlds. The arrival. 3 days later, Lena was sweeping rainwater out of her apartment's broken corridor when she heard the hum. It wasn't the whirring of street hovercraft or the sputter of overused maintenance drones. This was deeper, heavier, a sound that pressed against the lungs and made the ribs tremble. The neighborhood kids stopped playing. Dogs barked, then fled into shelters. Birds scattered like leaves tossed into a storm. Something massive was coming. Then came the rumble of treads, military grade. She stepped onto her balcony, mop still in hand, heart lodged in her throat. From the northern sky, 3 black dropships descended in formation, escorted by hover tanks with blinding searchlights that snapped onto her building as if judgment had arrived. Her apartment complex, old, rusted, nearly condemned, was now surrounded by half the planetary security forces. Neighbors screamed. Windows shut like panicked eyes. But the ships didn't fire. The tanks didn't move forward. They merely waited. Lena blinked as a small landing ramp unfolded from the lead vessel with ceremonial grace. Soldiers clad in obsidian armor emerged, their faces hidden beneath sleek visors, their postures rigid. At the front of the procession stood a tall figure in silver robes draped with golden chains, carrying a staff crowned with a flickering blue gem. He was alien but not dragon-kind, something sleeker, with 4 arms and pale skin like glass. She stepped back from the balcony, bumping into her half-broken kitchen chair, unsure if she should hide or scream. Then a voice crackled over every comm, every speaker, every broadcast in the city. By order of the High Accord, House of Legion, and the ancient kinship pact, we have come for Lena Mallerie, the woman who honored the last elder. Her legs went weak. She barely made it to the door when someone knocked, not banged, but knocked gently, politely, as if they were old friends. Lena opened it with trembling fingers. The silver-robed envoy bowed low before her. "You gave up your seat," he said softly. "And in doing so, changed everything." Behind him, the streets lit up with reverent stillness. Above her, the sky opened, not with weapons, but with the thrum of wings older than time, descending in a wind of gratitude and flame. They didn't take her by force. In fact, they barely touched her at all. The envoy simply offered his hand, palm up, his eyes shimmering like water seen through crystal. Lena hesitated, glancing at the swarm of soldiers surrounding her modest building, her rain-warped floor still wet, her tea kettle still steaming faintly from earlier that morning. "Am I being arrested?" she asked, not out of fear but quiet confusion. The envoy bowed again, his voice as soft as dusk. "No, madam. You are being honored." He did not elaborate, not then. A pod descended from one of the escort ships, sleek and silent, its doors folding open like petals. Inside, the chamber glowed with soft golden light, and the scent of old parchment and starlight filled the air, like someone had bottled time itself. She stepped in, still barefoot, mop still in one hand. The pod closed, and the city fell away beneath them, growing smaller until it was just another glowing dot in the vast tapestry of lights below. The revelation. They didn't go far, hovering just above the skyline. Beyond the clouds waited a vessel unlike anything Terran engineers had ever conceived. It wasn't a warship, wasn't a palace. It was both and neither, shaped like a coiled wing mid-beat, shimmering with veins of organic metal and living crystal that sang softly in its own language. The ship pulsed as the pod docked. Lena was guided through corridors that breathed with soft bioluminescence, past chambers filled with floating gardens and walls that displayed the memories of 1,000 worlds. Everything here was alive, ancient, and impossibly beautiful. She was led into a chamber the size of her entire apartment block. The walls were alive, etched with memories, singing colors, whispering voices in languages that predated human speech. In the center stood the dragon. He was not seated this time. He stood tall, no longer hunched, his robes falling away to reveal wings newly healed, scales brushed and glinting with ceremonial oils. His eyes, once clouded, were bright with a gleam that did not belong to the present but to history itself. "You," he said, his voice a cathedral carved in wind, "are the first human to bow not in fear, but in courtesy. That is something our kind has not seen in 1,000 years." Lena's mouth went dry. I didn't know who you were." "That is precisely why it mattered." He stepped toward her slowly, the talons of his right foot clicking lightly against the ancient stone floor. When he reached her, he bent his long neck down, exhaling a warm breath that smelled faintly of copper, ash, and elder fruit. From beneath his wing, he pulled a small coiled object wrapped in silk and sealed with amber. "I am Vailthon, last of the Aladdin, keeper of the old covenants. For 3 centuries, I have wandered the galaxy, seeking one thing, a sign that the younger races still carried honor in their hearts. He placed the wrapped object in her hands. It was warm, almost alive. Your people, he continued, have spread across the stars like wildfire. They build mighty cities, command vast fleets, terraform worlds. But in all my travels, I have seen only greed, fear, and the hunger for power. Until 3 days ago. Lena stared at the gift, afraid to unwrap it. What is it? A seed, Veilthon said simply. The last seed of the heartwood tree, which once grew at the center of our homeworld. It has been dormant for millennia, waiting for the right hands to plant it. Hands that have shown true kindness without expectation of reward. The chamber around them began to shift, walls becoming transparent, revealing the vast expanse of space beyond. Earth hung below them, blue and beautiful and fragile. The Aladdin were guardians once, Veilthon continued, his voice heavy with memory. We protected the younger races, guided them, helped them grow. But we grew tired, and one by one, we faded into legend. I am the last. He gestured to the transparent walls, and suddenly the space around them filled with shapes, dozens of ships, each one different, each one magnificent. But you, Lena Mallerie, have reminded the galaxy that honor still exists. Word of your kindness has spread to every corner of known space. The hegemony of suns has sent their finest vessels. The crystal communes have awakened from their meditative slumber. Even the void wanderers have emerged from the dark between stars. Lena's eyes widened as she realized what she was seeing. They're all here because of me. Because of what you represent, Veilthon corrected gently. Hope. The possibility that this galaxy might yet be saved from itself. The honor. The assembled fleet was a sight beyond imagination. Ships of every conceivable design floated in perfect formation around them, crystalline vessels that caught starlight and threw it back in rainbow cascades, sleek bioships that moved like living things, geometric constructs that seemed to fold space around themselves. Representatives from 100 worlds had come to witness this moment. I don't understand, Lena whispered, still clutching the wrapped seed. All this, for giving up a seat. Veilthon's ancient eyes crinkled with something that might have been amusement. You think it was just a seat? Child, you offered dignity to a being you had never seen before, whose reputation could have terrified you into silence. In that moment, you chose compassion over fear, kindness over indifference. That choice echoed across the quantum consciousness networks that connect all thinking beings. He gestured, and the chamber filled with holographic images, scenes from across the galaxy. The Trilarian hive mind felt your act of kindness as a warm pulse through their collective consciousness. The ethereal monks of Zenith Prime paused their 1,000-year meditation to acknowledge it. Even the machine collective registered it as an anomaly worth investigating. Lena watched in awe as the images shifted, showing beings of every description, some humanoid, others so alien they barely registered as life forms to her eyes. All of them had somehow been touched by her simple act. But why me? She asked. I'm nobody special. I clean floors, I take the subway, I go home to an empty apartment. There are millions of people who do kind things every day. Precisely, Veilthon said. You are not a politician seeking votes, not a celebrity seeking praise, not a diplomat calculating advantage. You are what your people call an ordinary person, and that makes your kindness extraordinary. It proves that honor exists not just in the halls of power, but in the hearts of those who scrub floors and take late trains. The dragon moved to a raised platform at the center of the chamber. Around them, the walls became fully transparent, revealing the vast assembly of ships. Each one began to emit a soft, harmonious tone, a symphony of 100 different species singing in unity. The Galactic Council has been deadlocked for decades, Veilthon explained as the music swelled around them. Wars threaten to tear apart the very fabric of civilization. But your act has reminded us all of what we're fighting for, not territory or resources, but the chance to be better than we were. He raised his staff, and the blue gem at its tip blazed with light. By the authority vested in me as the last keeper of the old covenants, I name you, Lena Mallerie, as the first Harmony ambassador, a bridge between species, reminder of the kindness that connects us all. The chamber erupted in light as every ship in the fleet sent a beam of energy toward them. The beams converged on the platform where Lena stood, but instead of burning her, they filled her with warmth, with connection, with the knowledge that she was no longer alone. The seed, Veilthon said gently, will grow into a tree that bears fruit capable of healing the deepest wounds, physical, emotional, and spiritual. But it will only grow in soil nurtured by continued acts of kindness. Will you accept this responsibility? Lena looked at the wrapped seed in her hands, then at the ancient dragon, then at the impossible fleet of ships surrounding them. Her cleaning uniform felt suddenly insignificant, but not in a bad way. It felt like it was just the beginning of something much larger. Yes, she said simply. I accept. The new dawn. The ceremony that followed was unlike anything in recorded history. Representatives from every ship in the fleet transported aboard Veilthon's vessel, filling the great chamber with beings of impossible diversity. They came in peace, in curiosity, in hope. Lena stood at the center of it all, still in her faded green uniform, still barefoot, still holding that mop, but now she also held the seed that would change everything. The beings around her spoke in languages that sounded like music, like mathematics, like the whisper of wind through crystal forests. But somehow, she understood them all. The gift of the Harmony ambassador, Veilthon explained, was not just symbolic. It was a real connection to the quantum consciousness that linked all thinking beings. She could feel their thoughts, their hopes, their dreams, and they could feel hers. The tree will need a place to grow, said a representative of the crystal communes, their voice like the chiming of bells. We offer the garden worlds of the tertiary spiral. Our bioships can nurture its growth, added a speaker for the hegemony of suns, their form shifting like living starlight. We will tend it with solar winds and cosmic radiation. The machine collective will record its growth, stated a chrome-plated being whose eyes glowed with digital fire. We will preserve every moment for future generations. But Lena shook her head gently. Thank you, all of you. But I think it needs to grow on Earth. In ordinary soil, tended by ordinary people doing ordinary kindnesses. That's how it will mean the most. The assembled beings considered this, and one by one, they began to nod, or perform whatever gesture of agreement their species used. Wisdom, Veilthon said approvingly. The tree will grow stronger if it grows among those who need its lessons most. The return to Earth was as gentle as the departure had been sudden. The fleet maintained its position above the planet, but now it was no longer a show of force, it was a show of support. Ships from across the galaxy stood ready to assist, to share knowledge, to help humanity and Earth take their next steps into the wider universe. Lena planted the seed in the small garden behind her apartment building, in a patch of dirt that had never grown anything but weeds. But as she pressed it into the earth, she felt something change. The soil seemed to welcome it, to recognize it as something precious. Within hours, a small sprout appeared. Within days, it was a sapling. Within weeks, it was a tree unlike any seen on Earth, tall and strong, with leaves that shimmered like starlight and fruit that glowed with inner warmth. People came from all over the city to see it. Then from all over the planet. They came expecting a miracle, but they found something better, they found inspiration. The tree's presence seemed to bring out the best in everyone who stood beneath its branches. Acts of kindness multiplied. Strangers helped strangers. Old grudges were forgotten. And slowly, the tree began to bear fruit. The first piece was given to a child in the hospital where Lena worked, a little girl who had been dying of a rare disease. The fruit healed her completely. The second went to an elderly man who had lost his will to live after his wife's death. It gave him peace and purpose. The third helped a mother and son reconcile after years of bitter separation. Word spread. The tree became a symbol of hope, not just for Earth, but for the entire galaxy. Representatives from the assembled fleet began to visit, not as conquerors or saviors, but as friends. They shared their knowledge, their art, their stories. Earth began to heal, not just from its environmental wounds, but from the deeper wounds of fear, mistrust, and isolation. Lena continued to work at the hospital, but now her cleaning duties were interspersed with her role as Harmony ambassador. She helped negotiate trade agreements between Earth and the crystalline communes. She mediated disputes between the Machine Collective and the ethereal monks. She even helped establish the first interstellar university, where beings from across the galaxy could learn from each other. But perhaps most importantly, she continued to take the subway every day. She continued to offer her seat to those who needed it. She continued to show that kindness was not a grand gesture, but a daily choice. Years passed. The tree grew ever larger, its branches reaching toward the stars, its roots spreading deep into the earth. Its fruit fed the hungry, healed the sick, and mended the broken-hearted. More trees began to grow, one on every world that chose to join the expanding alliance of species that had come together in the name of harmony. And in the heart of it all, an ancient dragon lived out his final years in contentment, knowing that his long search was over. He had found what he was looking for, proof that the universe was not doomed to darkness, but could still choose light. On the day Veilthon passed peacefully into the eternal rest of his people, Lena stood beneath the great tree and felt the presence of every being across the galaxy who had been touched by kindness. They were all connected now, all part of something larger than themselves. She smiled, still wearing her faded green uniform, still ready to offer her seat to anyone who needed it. The universe was vast and full of wonders, but sometimes the greatest wonders were the simplest ones, a moment of kindness, a offered seat, a choice to see the dignity in every living being. The tree rustled in the wind, its leaves singing a song that could be heard across the stars, and Lena knew that everything was exactly as it should be. The end.